From the terrifying V2 to the legendary Katyusha, World War II saw the birth of modern missile warfare. The Allies and Axis powers unleashed dozens of rocket systems on the battlefield, from primitive, unguided artillery to revolutionary guided weapons that change warfare forever. This video breaks down every important missile and rocket system they deployed during the conflict. Let's begin with guided missiles, Germany's most revolutionary weapons. The V1, known as the Fi-103 or Buzz Bomb, was the world's first operational cruise missile. Powered by a simple pulse jet engine that produced a distinctive buzzing drone, it carried an 1,800-pound warhead toward London and other Allied cities. Launched from fixed ramps across occupied France, the V1 struck terror into civilian populations, though its slow speed and predictable flight path meant many were shot down by fighters and anti-aircraft guns before reaching their targets. The V2, designated A4 by its designers, represented an even more terrifying leap forward. This liquid-fueled ballistic missile was the first of its kind, soaring to the edge of space before plummeting down at supersonic speeds. Standing 46 feet tall and capable of delivering a 2,000-pound warhead over nearly 200 miles, the V2 gave its victims no warning and no defense. Its impact created a supersonic shockwave that arrived before the sound of its approach, a weapon literally faster than sound itself. While revolutionary, it arrived too late and in too few numbers to alter Germany's fate. The Henschel HS-293 pioneered a different approach entirely. This radio-guided glide bomb featured stubby wings and a rocket booster, allowing bomber crews to guide it towards ships from a safe distance. Operators used a small joystick to steer the weapon via visual observation, watching a flare on its tail as it descended. It scored devastating hits against Allied vessels in the Mediterranean, proving that precision guidance could multiply a weapon's effectiveness dramatically. Fritz X, officially designated Ruhrstahl SD 1400X, took the concept even further. This armor-piercing bomb was essentially a massive 1,400-pound projectile with small control fins, dropped from high altitude and guided by radio commands. It achieved fame by punching through the deck armor of the Italian battleship Roma, sending her to the bottom with over 1,300 crew. The weapon demonstrated that even the heaviest warships were vulnerable to guided attack. The Ruhrstahl X4 represented Germany's attempt to create a wire-guided air-to-air missile. Connected to the launching aircraft by thin trailing wires, it allowed pilots to guide the missile toward enemy bombers with remarkable precision. Despite successful tests, it never reached operational service, arriving too late as Allied fighters swept the Luftwaffe from the skies. Germany's desperation to counter Allied bomber streams led to numerous experimental surface-to-air missiles. Rheintochter, Wasserfall, Enzian, and Schmetterling all showed promise in testing, featuring radio guidance and powerful warheads designed to shatter bomber formations. Wasserfall, in particular, closely resembled a scaled-down V2 and achieved impressive performance during trials. However, these ambitious projects consumed scarce resources, and none reached mass production before the war's end, representing technological achievement without strategic impact. While Germany pioneered guided weapons, they relied heavily on massed rocket artillery to saturate the battlefield with devastating firepower. Next on the list is rocket artillery and aircraft rockets. The 15-centimeter Nebelwerfer 41 became one of the most feared weapons on any front, earning the nickname Screaming Mimes from Allied troops who heard its distinctive shriek. This six-barreled launcher fired spin-stabilized rockets in rapid succession, creating a terrifying wail as they arced through the sky. While individually inaccurate, a battery of Nebelwerfers could saturate entire grid squares with high-explosive, devastating infantry caught in the open. The telltale smoke trails gave away the launcher's position, forcing crews to fire and relocate quickly. The 21-centimeter Nebelwerfer 42 traded barrel count for punch, mounting 5 larger tubes that fired heavier rockets with greater destructive power. Each projectile weighed over 240 pounds and could reach targets nearly 5 miles away. The psychological impact matched its physical devastation, as the larger rockets produced an even more bone-chilling howl during flight. Soviet troops dubbed them Stalin's organs due to the visual appearance of the tubes and the unholy screech they produced. For truly heavy bombardment, Germany fielded the 28-centimeter and 32-centimeter Nebelwerfer 41, a massive launcher capable of firing enormous rockets that required a substantial wheeled carriage. These monster projectiles could demolish fortifications and crater entire strongpoints, though their slow rate of fire and cumbersome size limited tactical flexibility. The weapon served primarily in siege operations where maximum destructive power mattered more than mobility. The Wurfrahmen 40 brought rocket artillery to the mechanized battlefield by mounting simple frames directly onto the sides of armored half-tracks. This crude but effective system allowed panzer divisions to bring saturation fire support with them during rapid advances. 6 rockets could be mounted on each side of the vehicle, creating a mobile platform that fired a devastating salvo before withdrawing under armor protection. The system sacrificed accuracy for mobility and shock value. Building on this concept, the Panzerwerfer 42 integrated a proper 10-barreled launcher onto a purpose-built armored half-track. This refinement provided better protection for the crew and allowed for faster reload times compared to the improvised Wurfrahmen. The vehicle could unleash its entire payload in under 10 seconds, creating a wall of fire that demoralized enemy troops and disrupted defensive positions before the panzers rolled forward. The 8-centimeter R-Vielfachwerfer represented Germany's attempt at a lightweight, portable rocket system. This multiple launcher could be broken down for transport by infantry units, providing even foot soldiers with devastating area effect firepower. While less powerful than the larger Nebelwerfers, its portability made it invaluable for infantry support in terrain where vehicles couldn't operate effectively. German aircraft received their own rocket armament in the form of the R-4M, nicknamed Orkan or Hurricane. This 55mm unguided rocket allowed fighters to engage bomber formations from beyond defensive gun range. Carried in underwing racks of 12 or 24, a single salvo could shred a heavy bomber's structure. The weapon proved devastatingly effective during trials, but arrived too late to stem the Allied bombing campaign. The Wurfgranat 21 took a different approach, mounting massive 21-centimeter rockets under fighter wings. These heavyweight projectiles were intended to break up tight bomber formations from long range, forcing them to scatter and become vulnerable to conventional cannon fire. The rocket's poor accuracy mattered less when fired into massed formations of hundreds of aircraft. Germany wasn't alone in recognizing the power of massed rockets. The Soviets created the most iconic rocket artillery system of the war, continuing with Soviet and American rocket systems. The BM-8 represented the Soviet Union's entry into mass-produced rocket artillery, mounting rails for 82mm rockets on ordinary truck beds. While smaller than later systems, it proved the concept that cheap, simple rockets fired in volume could devastate enemy positions. Soviet doctrine emphasized massing these launchers into dedicated battalions that could concentrate fire with overwhelming effect. The BM-13, universally known as Katyusha or Little Katy, became the most famous rocket system of World War II. Mounting 16 rails on a rugged truck chassis, it fired 132mm rockets that screamed across the battlefield, trailing smoke and flame. Soviet troops beloved the weapon for its reliability and devastating psychological impact. German soldiers learned to fear the distinctive howl of incoming Katyusha salvos, which could blanket entire sectors in explosive fury. The weapon's simplicity meant it could be mass-produced in vast numbers, and entire regiments of Katyushas firing hundreds of rockets simultaneously created an apocalyptic spectacle that shattered enemy morale as effectively as it destroyed equipment. For even heavier bombardment, the Soviets fielded the BM-3112, mounting 12 rails for massive 300mm rockets. Each projectile weighed over 200 pounds and could demolish fortifications or crater assembly areas. While slower to reload than the lighter systems, its destructive power made it invaluable during major offensives where Soviet forces needed to pulverize German defensive positions. The BM-1316 improved on the original Katyusha design by adding rails to create a 16-rocket launcher with improved mounting systems. This refinement allowed for faster reload times and better accuracy, though the weapon remained fundamentally an area saturation system rather than a precision instrument. Soviet heavy rockets designated M30 and M31 pushed the concept to its extreme, with projectiles so large they required specialized launchers. These massive rockets served as mobile siege artillery, capable of reducing strongpoints that would otherwise require sustained conventional bombardment. Soviet aircraft received their own rocket armament with the RS-82, an 82mm projectile mounted under fighter wings. While unguided and inaccurate, it gave ground attack aircraft a way to engage armored vehicles and fortifications from beyond small arms range. The RS-132 scaled up the concept, with 132mm rockets that packed considerably more punch. The ROFS-132 variant featured a fragmentation warhead optimized for shredding soft targets like trucks, artillery positions, and infantry concentrations. While Germany innovated and the Soviets mass-produced, American ingenuity focused on practical improvisation. The T-34 Calliope mounted a massive 60-tube rocket launcher directly atop a Sherman tank turret, creating a hybrid vehicle that could deliver devastating saturation fire while retaining its main gun capability. The launcher could be jettisoned if damaged, allowing the tank to continue fighting conventionally. The M8 rocket launcher provided American forces with a simple, effective 4.5-inch system that could be truck-mounted or towed. Less sophisticated than German or Soviet equivalents, it proved incredibly practical and reliable in the field, qualities American commanders valued highly. American aircraft received the HVAR, nicknamed Holy Moses by impressed pilots. This 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rocket combined solid fuel propulsion with a substantial warhead, making it devastatingly effective against ships, tanks, and hardened positions. The Tiny Tim pushed the concept to extremes with an 11.75-inch monster rocket that could sink destroyers or demolish fortified bunkers with a single hit. The British took a different approach, focusing on specialized systems for specific roles. Finally, we have British, Japanese, and specialized systems from across the global conflict. The Land Mattress represented Britain's answer to the Katyusha, mounting 33-inch rocket tubes in a massive projector that could be towed into position. Designed primarily for naval bombardment support, it proved equally effective against ground targets, saturating German positions with a rapid salvo that rivaled Soviet systems in destructive power. The weapon saw extensive use during the final push into Germany, where its ability to obliterate defensive positions made it invaluable for breaking through fortified lines. Britain's Z battery system took a defensive approach, mounting unrotated projectile rockets as anti-aircraft weapons. These 3-inch rockets trailed wire cables carrying small explosive charges, creating aerial minefields that bombers had to navigate. While less effective than conventional flak, the system provided a cheap way to defend vulnerable areas with minimal crew training. The UP-3 served a similar role, firing unguided 3-inch rockets skyward in hopes of disrupting enemy formations through sheer volume. The RP-3 became Britain's standard aircraft rocket, a 3-inch projectile with a 60-pound warhead that transformed typhoons and tempests into tank destroyers. Carried in pairs or quartets under the wings, these rockets could penetrate most armoured vehicles from the top and prove particularly devastating against German columns during the Normandy breakout. Pilots appreciated the weapon's simplicity and reliability, though accuracy remained challenging even for experienced crews. Uncle Tom scaled up the concept dramatically, mounting a heavy warhead on a larger rocket body for attacking hardened targets. While less common than the RP-3, it gave British aircraft the ability to demolish bridges, bunkers, and other fortifications that smaller rockets merely damaged. Japan struggled to develop effective rocket systems, hampered by material shortages and industrial limitations. The Type 4 20-centimeter rocket launcher mounted multiple tubes for area bombardment, attempting to copy the success of German and Soviet systems. However, Japanese rockets suffered from poor propellant quality and inconsistent manufacturing, resulting in frequent misfires and reduced range compared to Allied equivalents. The Type 10 rocket mortar provided Japanese infantry with a portable barrage weapon, though its crude construction and limited ammunition supply made it more of a desperation measure than an effective combat tool. Soldiers often preferred conventional mortars, despite their heavier weight. The Rogo Kogata represented Japan's experimental attempts at developing more sophisticated systems, but these projects never progressed beyond limited testing. Resources that might have refined these weapons were instead diverted to kamikaze programs and conventional defense preparations. Italy developed virtually no indigenous rocket systems, relying almost entirely on German weapons supplied to Italian units. Limited industrial capacity and shifting allegiances meant Italian forces never fielded meaningful rocket artillery of their own design. While most World War II missiles were actually unguided rockets that saturated areas with explosives, they revolutionized battlefield tactics and forced armies to disperse and dig deeper than ever before. Germany's guided weapons showed the future, demonstrating that precision strike capability would eventually dominate warfare. But it was massed rocket artillery, cheap and devastating in volume, that truly shaped the war. From the Katyusha's legendary salvos to the Nebelwerfer's terrifying shriek, these weapons proved that sometimes quantity has a quality all its own. Only Germany successfully deployed true guided missiles in combat operations, but every major power recognized that rockets had changed warfare forever.